Okay, my Rabbi side. We're learning Lishma until the Cholent and the Kogel get here. In the meantime, can we learn in Lishma? We're going to do a piece. It's Vayakhel. It's Parshas Para. I also want to share a story with the Olam. I was Zeicha to get a little bit of revenge. Every Yid wants to get revenge from Hitler Yamach Shemai. And I'd like to share with you that I was Zeicha to a little bit of revenge. On Motzei Shabbos, my son and myself and one of our cousins flew out to Budapest. We went back. It was a Nisiya Shorashi. It was back to our Shorashim, to where my mother, soll sie sein gesund und lang leben, where she comes from, and where my father, Scheiner Levracha, he comes from. They're both born in Romania, a few kilometers from each other. There's a city called Satmar, known as Satu Mare. You might have heard, it's a big city in Romania. 60 kilometers outside of Satmar, in the mountain area, there are a bunch of little cities. Holmin, Batorch, Komlosh, Tarnamare. My father, Zechariah Levracha, was born in Tarnamare, which is today the border of Romania and Ukraine. To get into the Beis Akvaris, you have to actually cross the border. You have to show your passport, because the entrance to the Beis Akvaris is on the Romanian side, but in the middle of the Beis Akvaris, it goes over to Ukraine. So you're basically entering there, mamish on the Gvul. Where it was back then, I didn't go in. I stood by the door, but my other cousin, Simcha Bunim, he went. And then we went to my mother's town. And I was there on Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. My son was taking videos for a documentary, Be'ez Hashem, we're going to do for my mother's 100th birthday, Be'ez Hashem, next month. In 1944, Nazi troops crossed the border to make Romania Judenrein. You know what that means? Free of Jews. They gathered together all the Jews from their little houses and brought them into the Shul and locked them there for a week until they deported them. Even the Romanians who were hiding Jews were forced by the threat of death, as the Nazis, Yamach Shemam, went around with announcing that if you're hiding a Jew, you'll be shot dead. So in 1944, right after Pesach, I think it was on Chalamoid Pesach, all the Jews were taken away. And on Tuesday morning, I came back to Komlosh with my son at Nets. I put on my talis and tefillin, and I told Hitler Yamach Shemai, the Jews are back. You think you got rid of us? You think you got rid of us? We'll come back whenever we want. And if we want to daven in this city, who's going to stop us? And I had in my mind that whatever Kedusha, whatever Nitzaitis were left, now we'll take them out. You're not going to tell us when to leave. We'll take out when we're ready to go. Ani avodecha ben amasecha. Ich bin the Eibishter's servant. My mother was born in that city. We went back to the place of where her house is. I don't know if the house is still there because it looks a little bit newer than it would have been. But the shul or the old area was there, and the mikveh was still there. We have the pictures. We have the place of the town itself. And I davened in that town and said Shema in that town and told the Eibishter that no matter how much the Goyim can try to hit us to beat us, to take us there. Eibishter, you live forever, and through you, we live forever. That was my little nakama. Thank you, Hashem. Okay, let's take a look. Page Tav Lamed. We're going to learn about another house, the Mishkan. In the Pasuk, Ra'u Kara Hashem b'Shem Betzalel ben Uri ben Chor Lamata Yehuda. Moshe Rabbeinu is telling Klal Yisrael, Ra'u, behold, your leader, the one who will be in charge of the Mishkan, will be Betzalel ben Uri ben Chor Lamata Yehuda. Pirish Rashi, Chor beno shel Miriam Haya. Miriam's son asks the Zera Shimshon, Frek the Zera Shimshon. This isn't the first time Betzalel is mentioned within the capacity of being the person responsible for building the Mishkan. And back in Parshas Kisiso, it says, Re'ei Korosi b'Shem Betzalel ben Uri ben Chor Lamata Yehuda. Over there, Chor is mentioned, and over there Rashi does not say Chor beno shel Miriam. Would it not be appropriate that the first time Chor's name is mentioned, that you should tell us Chor beno shel Miriam? Lama, why is Rashi waiting to the second time in this week's parsha to mention what basically, if medavdos wissen, if we need to know it, we should know it the first time around, not the second time. Lomer zain inavenig. Reb Jonathan, you have a makam kavua. Says the Zera Shimshon, see the kasha, kosha, again, page Tov Lamed, Parshas Vayakhel, letter Vav. Kosha, Maro Rashi Lefarish Khan the Chor beno shel Miriam. Why did Rashi have to say over here, Hoyo v'lo pirshu le'el beParshas Kisisa bePasuk re'ei karasi b'Shem v'sham hoya mekayma yoser? It would be more tsugepast, more appropriate that there it should be mentioned. Shehu mukdam. Das ist der erste Platz, it's the first place. V'yesh loymar, sagt der Zera Shimshon a gewaltige Wort. Chor's being the Zaidi of Betzalel, and the one who is Zoicha to have such an enikol, Betzalel's merit, his own zechus, came from his Zaidi, Chor, and from his elder Baba, Miriam. And in each place, we mention appropriately why each of them and how each of them were zoicha to be mizakeh, to allow have their grandson be the one who was in charge and had the chokhmah and the seichel to build the Mishkan. Lamer zen, v'yesh loimer, the bish leimo le'el. Earlier, Hayisi Yachol Loymar, you could have said Sheher Eleh Kadosh Baruch Hu LaMoshe Dar V'Chachamav. In Parshas Kisisa, it's Loshen Yachid. Re'ei, the Eibusher is talking to Moshe Rabbeinu individually. Re'ei, Zogte V'Heroloi Chur V'Heroloi Misosa L'Chvoid Shamayim. And he showed how he died l'chvayt shemayim. Let's just chazer over for a minute a little bit of the history. The egel that Lo Yaleinu Klal Yisrael made, when Moshe Rabbeinu didn't come down from the mountain when they thought he would come down, they approached Aaron. Aaron and Hur were in charge. And they approached him and said, Kizeh Moshe Ish, his Moshe, we don't know what happened to him. We need somebody else. We need some other intermediary to get us out of here. We need to get out of it. We need to go to Eretz Yisrael. So they wanted to make an egel. Hur told them they shouldn't do it. Hur died al kvoid shamayim. he stood up against them and they murdered him. Says the Zera Shimshon, Misosoi lechvoid shamayim. He perished and he was killed l'koved shamayim. Ve'herolei betzalo ben benoi. So Moshe Rabbeinu was told that his grandson Betzalo zoicheli as rishon b'malechas hamishkan. Re'u, he says Re'ei karosi b'shem Betzalo ben Uri ben Chor lamata Yehuda ve'emala oisoi ruach Elokim. He will have the spirit ruach Elokim. Ruach is the letters Chor backwards. From Chor's Mesiras Nefesh, from Chor's Mesiras Nefesh, kum te Ruach Elokim. That's where he gets the spirit of the Eibishter. Umishum hachi shaykh loimer loshen re'ei. Meshayich nemer lahasker shem Chor. Because his Mesiras Nefesh was taka, one of the reasons that Betzalel was Zoicha. Betzalel was how old, Rabbi, at this time? Oh, Doilim remembers Sanhedrin. We just had it in Daf Yomi. He was 13, good. And the next year already when they built it, he was 14. Remember the bottom of the page? Over there on Amid Beis. You remember? Yeah. Right. 8 years old, who you said was this age of his Zaidi. Right? The Gemara learned out that you can have a child at the age of, back then, at the age of 8. Gemara made a cheshbon of the 26 years. But he was already, because Kalev was 40, and he was already 14. Bekitzer, he was Sachakol 13 or 14 years old when he built the Mishkan. What kind of schus did he have? Well, one schus was he had the Ruach Elokim, he had Chur. That was one of his schuyot. Avo Gabe Yisrael. So by Moshe Rabbeinu it says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed him the schus of Chur. That shaykh by Moshe Rabbeinu was not involved with the Egel. Avo Gabi Yisrael shaykh lo meru. First of all, Shem lo yoyim sefer shel adam arishin ksuvim by kol dor v'chachameim. They were not able to see the book that Moshe Rabbeinu was able to see. V'lama lo lomer kan re'u. So what did he say re'u? What do you want to show them? Vos villains, what does the Eibishter want to tell Moshe Rabbeinu that he should tell Klal Yisrael? V'imishum shoyu yoidim shahargu chur umishum hachi roitze shechabdu ben benoi. Maybe the Eibishter wants Moshe Rabbeinu to let Klal Yisrael be mechabed chur because he was Meiser Nefesh. Says the Zera Shimshon, I don't think that Klal Yisrael would feel comfortable with Chur's grandson being the leader and involved in this project. It brought back trauma for Klal Yisrael. This is the grandson of the person that they murdered. Zog de Zera Shimshon. V'imishum shayodim shahargu chum mishum hachi roitzi shechabed benoi. Adrabe. Mitam ze mamish efshishol lo yechvatzu boy. They don't want him to be there. Number one, Shema Yomiru. First of all, they would say, Chur, imu tzaddik v'chosid. Who says he was such a big tzaddik? Why didn't the Eibishter save him? A. B. Ve'ein ma'amidim parnes ala tzibur elam kenim lochem betzibur. You cannot have a leader in Klal Yisrael be a parnes unless Klal Yisrael, unless the nation is maskim. V'araya me betzalel. Shamala Kadosh Baruch Hu leMoshe sheyisha liyisrael hagim bechem Betzalel. The Eibishter, we learn from Betzalel that the Eibishter asked Moshe Rabbeinu, see and find out if Klal Yisrael's maskim that Betzalel should be the leader. Why? Upirish Marsha beperakam de Sanhedrin. The reason is because sometimes if you have a leader that's going to be a dictator, it's not going to be good for the nation. V'al zeh heshiva leMoshe im lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'necha hogan lefnei like kol shekain. When Moshe Rabbeinu asked Klal Yisrael, are you masking with Betzalel? The Klal Yisrael answered, absolutely. If it's good for you, it's good for us. That's what they said. V'hashta, let me ask you, says the Zera Shimshon, whose zchus was it that Klal Yisrael was masking that Betzalel should be their leader? Do you think it was the zchus of Chur? The Eba Hashtim Tam Zechiras Chur Kan Hoyeloi Lahasker Shehargu Oisam. If you're going to mention the fact, like it says by Moshe, that the reason that Betzalel was zoichet to be able to be the leader was because his grandfather Chur was Meiser Nefesh, that works for Moshe Rabbeinu. But does that work for Klal Yisrael? On the contrary, they would be worried that maybe Betzalel has a sinner towards them. Chur is not a good reason for them to choose Betzalel, his grandson, as a leader. Maybe you shouldn't go ahead and listen to him. I'm going to skip for a minute. Lekach Pirish Rashi. Chur beno shel Miriam. When it mentions Chur, says the Zera Shimshon. When it mentions Chur by Moshe, it's his Mesiras Nefesh. When it mentions Chur by Klal Yisrael, it mentions Chur because he's Miriam's son. Zog de Zera Shimshon. K're'isa b'medrash. Shebeschus Miriam zocha Betzalel lechochma. Says the Medrash. I'm going to read it for you. Zog de Medrash. Kol hashevach hazeh menayin loy. How was Betzalel zoicha ve'emala oisay ruach chochma usvuna v'das? How is he zoicha to have this ruach Elokim? Says the Medrash, meheicha zochen l'chol ha'chochma azois. Zog the Medrash b'schus Miriam. Shenemar vayaso lahem botim. Mehoya botim, says Rashi in the beginning of Parshas Shmois. The first story about Klal Yisrael was two women, a mother and a daughter, Shifra and Puah. Paroi, Melech Mitzrayim, put a tremendous amount of pressure on them. The Medrash says two things he wanted from them. Number one, as a state in the Torah, he wanted them to kill the Jewish children, but he also was interested in them personally. He wanted them for himself. And they said, Loi mitan aleph. It's not easy for Jewish people, women, slaves, to tell Paroi, the murderer, no. And still they did it. Says the Medrash, because of that, Mehoyo habotim beis kahuna umalchus. Yeah, that's kahuna, malchus. Yechevet notlo kahuna malchus. Aaron hakoyinu Moshe melech. Miriam notlo chochma shehemida Betzalel v'yotza mimenu David. So Miriam's zechus Vayaso lehem batim, says the Zera Shimshon, her Mesiris Nefesh of not allowing herself, and Kol Oizen Shamas, let's pay attention for a minute, Rabbi Sai. Ma'olam like karasi leishti, ishti, says the Gemara, ela karasi leishti, basi. A person, right, Scheiner zugen in Yiddish, as magait riefen the Frau, the Stieb. Right? Some people do that, right? Not us, okay? Some people do, not me. Some people call their Rebbitzin Stieb. You know what Stieb is? The house, that's right. They're the Loshen Naki. Because by the Chassidim, they don't always call their wives by the first name. That's a separate shiur. We'll talk about that. Hello. They just talk. Mami, yeah, that's right. Aber Chazal zugen that the Isha is the Akeres HaBayis. And they mean it in the nicest and most barimt and the most beautiful way. They're known as Akeres HaBayis. Paroi put pressure on Yocheved and on Miriam. He wanted them. And they said, no, we're not going to be your Stieb. We're not going to be your house. We have our own houses to build. Which house was Miriam Zoicha to build? Ein Zekim Beis Elokim, the Mishkan that we had in the Midbar. Who built it? Bitzalel. With which koyach? Zogt Rashi Chor Beno Shel Miriam. Miriam's zchus. So when it says in Sefer Shmois, in the beginning of Parshas Shmois, Vayas lehem batim, that they had batim, Parsha Pshat, you learn, they were able to establish Klal Yisrael there and then in Mitzrayim. That's Parsha Pshat. Thanks to the Medrash and the Zera Shimshon, we learn a new Pshat. Zocha tabatim velecha batim. The Bais Hamishkan, the Mokem Ashra Shechina, because thanks to her defiance of Paroi and understand I'm not going to give in to you, so she was zoicha to have a bias of Hashrois Shechina, no different than the Imois of Sora, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, where they were zoicha to have the Shechina rest amongst them. Who adin over here, Klal Yisrael was zoicha to have Ashrois Hashchina. So when Chur is mentioned, Zog the Zera Shimshon, Sedot Tzvei Dinim. Chur is mentioned by Moshe Rabbeinu. Re'ei individually, Karasi B'Shem B'Tzalel Ben Uri Ben Chur. Mitzad Atzmoi, Chur was Meiser Nefesh, so that Klal Yisrael shouldn't, Chas v'sholem he tried to stop them from making the Egel, and therefore he didn't want, Chas v'sholem, they should give themselves over to Avodah Zarah. Chur was Zoicha, that his Einakol would be a Malay, say Ruach Elikim, Ruach Oisias Chur. That was Chur's merit. Dosat the Rebbeinu Shem Gezok to Moshe Rabbeinu Pravat, that he told him in private. Oh, but to Klal Yisrael you can't say that, because Klal Yisrael spilled his blood. And Klal Yisrael, there was a taina. And listen to the taina that they had. Now let's go back to a little Zera Shimshon. V'oid af metam acher. There's a mitzvah to give teichacha when teichacha will be heard. And there's a mitzvah to keep your mouth shut when it won't be heard. Kishem shemitzvah loimer dover hanishma, kach mitzvah sheloi loimer. Don't say something if it won't be heard. If you're not sure if your kid is going to listen, don't say it. Then you have a mitzvah nisht zu sagen. Zug nisht, says the Heilige Zera Shimshon. V'kishera chur she'einam rotzim l'shmaya el devarav v'lo hoyoloi lehis ametz b'teichacha. He shouldn't have pushed so far. That they should be mezidim. Azoi zog the Zera Shimshon. The nimtza shu goyrim sheyavoy lidei shvichos domim. That he was goyrim v'yehelahem leiv ra olav al beisai. V'la yirtzu losis leishora v'choved. Klal Yisrael would not be able to accept the fact if we would put the light on Chur. So it comes out that Chur is more of a detriment than a Maila. Zokt Rashi, so why did it mention it? So why Taka did he say? The teretz is he mentioned Chur out Miriam. Zokt Rashi beno shel Miriam. Therefore, umishum hachi amalem re'u keloimer re'u es Miriam sha'atem chayavim bekvoido ubekvoid baneha ubevadish kiblo oisai. So Rashi skips Miriam the first time, because the first time it says Re'ei Karasi B'Shem B'Tzalel, it's talking to Moshe Rabbeinu. Legabe Moshe Rabbeinu, you can mention the merit of Chur, because Legabe Moshe Rabbeinu was Moser Nefesh, Kineged Klal Yisrael, and Taki does have a schus, and B'Tzalel has a schus of Chur, 100%, but Yene schus doesn't work for Klal Yisrael. For Klal Yisrael, it's the schus of Miriam, who was fakerd, boina the batim. The Ramban writes in his introduction to Sefer Shemos, every one of Chamishe Chumshe Torah has an introduction by the Ramban that explains the theme of the Sefer. The Ramban writes over there, why is it, asks the Ramban, that Sefer Shemos finishes with the Mishkan? What shayches does the Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Exodus, have to do with building of the Mishkan? It's like Sefer Shemos is divided into two totally different parts. The first part, which is Yetzias Mitzrayim, and the second part, which is Bichlal, nothing to do with Yetzias Mitzrayim, it's just the building of the Mishkan. And for the Ramban, it has to do with Yetzias Mitzrayim, because Klal Yisrael's Maila is they should get back Lemaila Avoisam. They're not considered free just because they walked out of Egypt. Freedom doesn't mean leaving Mitzrayim. Freedom means being at the Madrega where the Shechina is Shaira B'Soicham, where the Eibishter is amongst them the way they were with Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. When did that happen? When the Mishkan was built. Tonight we're learning who brought Klal Yisrael to that Madrega. That's the secret of the story of Miriam and Yocheved in the beginning of Shemos, to teach us that thanks to them standing up to Paroi, Vaya'as lohem botim, veleche batim, the batim of B'Tzalel and the Bais HaMishkan that was able to be built later on at the end of the Parsha, at the end of the Sefer. This is the batim of Sefer Shemos. So in the beginning, the seeds of the batim were already planted thanks to Miriam. Ra'u karasi b'shem B'Tzalel ben Uri ben Chur, says Rashi, the second time, beno shel Miriam. Miriam is the reason he was given this chachma. The Osi Shaper Nami Le'el beParsha Shlach. Apostle Moshe Aaron v'Chur lo pirish Rashi klum. It doesn't say over there. V'achakach beParshas Mishpotim hine Aaron v'Chur imochem sham ksuv shechur b'no shel Miriam. Why? Because beParshas Mishpotim diber b'chochmosei shel Chur sheyuro leishav b'dinim Aaron. That chochma was chochmas noshim. Bonsa Besa. That was the chachma of the women that built the house. Chur Betzalel was the product of Miriam, who was able to give Klal Yisrael the Mokem of Ashrois HaShechina. Parshas Parah, we'll finish with 1 minute. On Parshas Parah, the Gemara says, Lama nismecha misas Miriam to Parah Aduma. Miriam's Misa, Mereden Vegan Miriam, she is the one who teaches us that tzaddikim, right, are mechaper. Now is the time. Tzaddikim, at the end of the Shiur, now kemenesim. Tzaddikim are mechaper. Rabbi said we're finished in a minute, then Olam can eat. Tzaddikim are mechaper. They are mechaper like the Parah Aduma. The Gemara says, tzaddikim and the Parah and Parah Aduma, just like Karbonis are mechaper, Mises Tzadikim are mechaper. Frag de Welt. Parah Aduma is not such a mechaper. Parah Aduma is more of a metaher. Why, of all the Karbonis, bring a chatos? Why is the carbon chosen? Why was Parah Aduma chosen as the example of the carbon that teaches us that Misas Tzadikim HaMechaper? So I once said, a carbon, regular, you bring it once and it's done. You want to do a Nachamol, and a person needs another carbon, there's a sin, bring noch a carbon. But Parah Aduma, you could use it again and again and again. It's one of the only things that it gets, you can use it again and again. So to the schus of a tzaddik. Every time a person davens and invokes the schus of a tzaddik, gedoyla tzaddikim b'misosam yosem mechayeyim, it never uses up the schus. Tonight is the yard site of the Noam Elimelech. It's his yard site. I just, Baruch Hashem, was zoicha to go to Reb Shayla. People go to the Rebbe over here, the Ribnitzer, and they mamish see Yeshuas. You know why? Because they take the opportunity to use the Misas Tzadikim for them to get closer. It's not easy for a person every day to get close to the Eibishter. But sometimes they have a schus, they go to a kever of a tzaddik, and that gives them the extra power. It's not the tzaddik that does it, Rabbi say. It's you that does it. You through your tefillas. But sometimes you don't always have the right frame of mind to be able to daven the way you're supposed to. And you go to a mokim that has kedusha, and you're zoicha taka to bring out that kedusha that is there within you. Miriam was zoicha to bring out the kedusha that was within her for herself and for Gans Klal Yisrael. So metaka ala zoiches and be'ezus Hashem Yisbarach to get to that level of kedusha v'tahara that there is within us.